right, well, let's go ahead and get started. It is 2 after on my clock here. I'm on the Eastern time zone, so it's 1:02. But we'll go ahead and get started. We're really excited. Allison and I have played a big role in sort of getting this UDL product certification developed and then piloted and now implemented. So I'm so excited to be with you all this afternoon. My name is Luis Perez, and I'm a Disability and Digital Inclusion Lead at CAST. I've been at CAST for almost 7 years. In fact, next month it's my 7th year anniversary of joining CAST, which is one of the
Woo!
big milestones in my life. It's something that I always dreamed of doing. And in fact, this is so great to present with Allison because one of my first engagements with CAST was doing a institute with Allison back when we had headquarters in Wakefield, Massachusetts. So we go a long way back, even before I joined CAST. And today I'm part of our post-secondary and workforce development group. But in my role as a disability and digital inclusion lead, I work with just about everyone at CAST to make sure that our products and services are as accessible as we can make them. So I'm going to turn it over to Allison to do a brief introduction.
And I remember that presentation that we did together, Luis, and I remember saying to people at CAST, we need to work with him more.
Little
He's
did you
really
know.
good. I know. And you shared a tool. We at the time did post-it notes on the boards, and you shared a tool where I could digitize those post-it notes. And, it was just a little thing, but it made a difference. So, hi, everyone. I'm Allison Posey. I actually just celebrated my 14th year at CAST. So, we both must have come on in November. And I've had a number of roles during that time. Most of what I do, though, across all the roles and all the years at CAST is really think deeply about UDL implementation in every kind of context. I don't think there's a context I haven't thought about UDL. I even had someone say UDL impacted my relationship. And so I've even thought about it outside of our classrooms, outside of our workplaces, even in, the day to day. How is the design helping us or becoming a barrier to us being able to do what we need to do, what our goals are? So I am officially a learning design and research specialist is my current title. And yeah, located just out of the Boston area. And guess I'll just add my background is in mind, brain, and education. So I really do always try to continue to ground my work in learning in the brain and what we know about the brain and how we can make sure our products, our curricula, our whatever it is really supporting what we know about learning in the brain. So happy to be here with you all today. Thank you for having me.
And you'll see as we talk a little bit further about the UDL product certification, you'll see why Allison and I are a perfect team when it comes to reviewing products for UDL alignment. We focus on different areas, but together we kind of bring it together at the end for the UDL product certification. So I would love to know who you are. So it looks like the chat is open in this format. But if you want to share who you are, where you're joining from, and then what your role is and why you're interested in this topic, that would be awesome. So I see a few coming through. Oh, Allison is going to be presenting at the AT Ties conference. So you're getting to connect ahead of time here. So that's awesome.
Amazing. One of my favorite projects was our collaboration with the Ties Center.
Absolutely. So I wish I could be at that conference. And I see Molly is an accessibility specialist from Fairfax County Public Schools in Northern Virginia. Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for joining us, Molly. Jen Sims, an AT member in North Carolina. We do some work in North Carolina. I do with Johnston
Wonderful.
Community College and Johnston Community Public Schools. So
And I will
great to
add
see
to
you.
that, actually, I personally, my son was born at UNC Hospital. They left the ink on his foot, so he was born a Tar Heel. So if you're a basketball fan, that means something to you.
Yes, the University of North Carolina Tar Heels. And we have Courtney joining us from Indiana. Let's see who else. It's now going through. We have Jenks, partner of ours at CAS. So Jenna, welcome. Great to see you again here in Oklahoma. So our good friends in Oklahoma, I have a couple here from Oklahoma. Pennsylvania, I will be in Pennsylvania next month, right after the Thanksgiving holiday. I'll be doing a keynote at Penn State. So lots of connections here. I see Jill right outside of Boston. Maybe
Close to me,
you have
yes.
a coffee with Allison
That's
sometime
right.
and pick her brain. See what I did there? Because Allison is a brain specialist.
That's right.
Great. So I see just lots of diversity here. So we're excited to have you. We're excited to see the different roles that you're bringing to this. And so I think in all of these roles, the UDL product certification is going to be relevant and it's going to help you. So let's go ahead and get on with the show, as they say, right? So why develop a UDL product certification? And Allison, please chime in at any time. This is just one statistic, right? During the 2022-2023 school year, K-12 school districts access on average more than 2,500 EdTech tools. And I bet you
Mm,
that number is continuing to go up. Compare that to 2016, 2017. So like the last data point that we had before the pandemic, and it was just around
mm,
300 tools, right?
yeah.
So the number of EdTech tools that we're using in our districts is growing exponentially, right? By multiple factors here. And that's a positive thing. And I think that's one of the silver linings of the pandemic is that we became more aware of the power of digital tools, right? We started using more of them. And not only our students, but our faculty, our teachers, our administrators are more well versed in the use of these tools. So I'm a positive guy and I like to look at the silver lining. And so to me, that is a silver lining. But along with that, there's a flip side. The flip side is, are those tools that we're using as inclusive, as accessible as they could be? And so that is a challenge because when you have just a deluge of tools coming into your environment, how do you know that, they're designed to really address a key term here that we use at CAS a lot, address learner variability? Right? How do we know that they're designed to be as accessible as they could be? And so we feel like the UDL product certification is a step in the right direction of helping us to vet, to curate tools that are more aligned to the UDL framework and can do that heavy lifting of making sure that we're including all learners. So I don't know if you want to say something, Allison.
Yeah, that adds to my why. Ideally, buildings are designed from the beginning to get more individuals into the building. And the curricula and the products that you use should be like that as well. So instead of having to always retrofit what's been given to you and adjust for this student and shift it for this student, ideally, those products from the beginning are designed to reduce the barriers and get all of your learners to the goal. And this should really alleviate a lot of the pressure on teachers to change it to retrofit all the time. So the big I heard a quote one time from a principal saying they had so many resources. They were a tech-rich environment, but the learning wasn't changing. So again, this is where I think UDL is a perfect place to make sure if we're using all these tools, as Louise said, how are they designed from the beginning to make sure each and every one of our learners can, in an equally effective way, be able to get into them and use them. So super important. That's my why for this work.
Well, and to go along, something that you've inspired me with, Allison, is you always say, look at the goal.
I
Right?
do,
Let's
don't I?
start with
Yeah.
the goal. Well, I'm
Yeah.
gonna I'm gonna mirror you and I'm gonna say start at the beginning with
Yes.
procurement. So procurement, 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 right?
Yes.
Because that's where we minimize the need for then when you're applying the tool, you're implementing it in the classroom, then it reduces the need to retrofit, right? If we procure tools that have captions, then that means you don't have to waste your time captioning content or
Mhm.
producing
Mhm.
descriptions. So procurement, procurement, procurement. I have a T-shirt right now because I'm a birder, and the T-shirt says "chickadee dee dee dee
You taught me
chickadee."
something about those DDDDDs.
Yeah, it has to do with the number, the threat, right? The more D's. So anyway,
DDDDD.
I want to get a T-shirt that says procurement, 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 because that is the key.
Yeah.
The more that you can do the heavy lifting at the procurement stage, right, the bigger the impact you can
Mhm.
have, because then it's not just that one individual student that you're impacting, it's everybody that's going to use that
Yes.
tool in that school year, 5 years from now, before you change to a different adoption. So we really emphasize the need to vet things at that procurement stage.
And before you change the slide, we do want to recognize some of you might be thinking, but UDL is never done. It's not a checklist. How are you going to do this? So we can't wait to share with you if you're
Yeah.
thinking that.
Yeah.
We hear you.
So CAS is part of an initiative, right, to address that challenge of we have all of these tools coming into our learning environments. How do we vet them, right? So along with a number of other organizations that we partner with, Digital Promise, I'm mentioning it first because that's the organization that we partner with directly to develop this UDL product certification. But then there are others like One EdTech, Innovate EDU, ISTE, the International Society for Technology and Education, COSIN, the Consortium of School Networking, and then CETA, the State Educational Technology Directors Association. We love acronyms, don't we, in education? So along with those organizations, at last year's ISTE conference, there was the release of the 5 EdTech quality indicators. And these are the things that we're looking for when we're procuring tools, right? We want to make sure that they're safe. We want to make sure that they're evidence-based, right? That they're actually doing what they say they're doing and they're having an impact on learning, that they're inclusive. And I bolded that one because that's the one that we're really going to focus on. How do we make sure that they work for all learners or as many learners as possible? That
Yes.
they're usable, right? So you're not having to jump through all kinds of hoops to get at the impact that you're after, right? And then that they're interoperable. Because again, when you have all of these tools coming together, if they don't work, with like, let's say your learning management system, if they don't have that integration, then you're going to do more work. And so interoperability is key. So I don't know if you want to speak to any of these, Allison, but that inclusive one is the one we're going to focus on.
It's a big one, and we pay money for these products. So when we put pressure back on on our curricular, our products to make them more all of these 5 things, they can listen to us, right? So I just think together our voices are really important to make sure we are demanding this of the resources that we're procuring.
And by the way, sometimes some of these, like, they actually work very well together.
Mhm.
So if you create something that's more inclusive, it's likely that it's going to be more usable because you're going to eliminate some of those barriers and addressing things like accessibility. You likely are going to make that product more usable for everybody, right? That's a big idea of universal design. Likewise, maybe that will result in better interoperability. And you by reducing some of the barriers related to accessibility, maybe you're creating a safer environment, right? Where all people feel like they're included and they can participate and so on. And in the end, if everybody can enjoy those characteristics of a safe, inclusive, usable environment, maybe your evidence of learning will go up, right? And if you have more people that are able to access learning and participate in learning. So again, we separate these sometimes for ease of explanation, but just know that they're all kind of reinforcing each other.
And from
Um,
a brain science perspective, I so appreciate that safe is first because that really is your initial appraisal of how a situation is for you. That's going to dictate whether or not you even pay attention to it and whether you're going to engage with it. And so having that safety first, I really appreciate from a brain science perspective.
Absolutely. I think a term that stuck with me is Maslow before Bloom's.
Yes,
So we
yes.
need to make sure that we address safety, belonging, and all of those things before people can really be open to learning, right? And I'm sure
Mhm, mhm.
Allison can provide you the citations from the brain science.
That's
All right, so let's get into what makes up this CAST UDL product certification. So really what we're looking at is at the core of the product's design, right? Does that product prioritize learner access and engagement? I love that we put those things together
right.
because they really kind of reinforce each other. If you don't have access, you're going to have a difficult time being engaged because you're going to focus on the barriers, right, that are keeping you from getting that access. And likewise, you have to be engaged because we can make something really accessible. But if it doesn't engage you, to quote our founder at CAST, David Rose, you're providing access to boredom. We don't want access to boredom. We want something that not only is accessible, but it's actually engaging and meaningful and something that matters to you. And so part of that is we're considering learners' interests and motivations, right? So we're making room for people to find personal meaning in these tools, right, and express themselves. And then, of course, the core principles of UDL. We're making sure that we're providing multiple ways for you to access the information and to do something with that information. And then we're also providing multiple ways for learners to share their knowledge and ideas so that we get a true measure and understanding of what they know.
And
So,
those of you who know the UDL guidelines, you're probably noticing there's the engagement, the representation, the action and expression in there. There's also our horizontal layers of access, getting to support, and then getting to those executive functions. And I'll just also note that we are saying prioritizing learners and considering learners. So we're really trying to think about how are these products supporting the learner agency, not the teacher to say, this is what you need and you have to do, and that's going to be different from you. And it really is trying to empower the learner to make their best learning choices, recognizing it goes best when you have an educator with you who's there to collaborate to make those decisions. But we really do want to emphasize the important role of the learner in these products and not just the educator.
absolutely. And so here on the screen, we have the badge that a product would get when they reach the ultimate level here with the UDL product certification. So they get this badge that they're able to display on their website, and then it will point back to the credential that they've earned. So there are two components. So basically, the way that this credential is designed, it's that it's stacked. You have two badges that you have to get in order to get the full credential. And so those are the accessibility baseline. We're going to break it down in just a minute. But you have the accessibility baseline, which basically is a statement that the product has, provided transparent communication about accessibility practices and conformance. So that doesn't necessarily mean the product is 100% accessible, right? And by the way, what is that? A product that's 100% accessible. But what we're saying
The
is,
dream. It's the dream,
yeah,
Luis.
it's the ideal.
That's right.
Absolutely. It's the
Yes.
ideal. It's what we aim for. But understanding that accessibility is contextual and products get updated all the time, right? Minor updates sometimes and sometimes bigger updates, right? So it's basically a snapshot when you're measuring accessibility, is what I'm saying. So what we're focusing on is, does this product provide everything that you need to make an assessment about it in terms of accessibility? And I'm going to look at some of the components. I have some examples to share with you. But what we look for. So to save you all time, if you submit a product, if you're a product developer, you submit a product, I want you to be successful when you submit for the certification. So again, the baseline is transparent communication is the focus. So if I am at a district and I am making purchasing decisions, do I have all of the components that I need to assess this product for accessibility? And then, so I do a lot of that work, the accessibility baseline. And then I turn it over to Allison, and she looks at alignment to the UDL framework and the guidelines. But we feel like accessibility is foundational to UDL. And so accessibility has to come first. You have to pass that first step of earning that badge before I even call Allison and say,
Yes, yes. I'll often hear there's one in the queue and then there's a pause because it is so fundamental and challenging. This is hard work and we recognize this is hard work to make these steps to make sure your product has both of these pieces, these elements. But we really view this as when you are submitting your product certification with us, you are starting a relationship with us for a journey to improve the product to make sure it is meeting those 5 elements that Luis described at the beginning. And so we don't anticipate everyone's going to be like, did it, check it off the list, but it really is the start of a conversation on let's make this better together.
and ultimately what we're after is like at the end of the certification, we have a reflection. And the reflection asks, how has this changed your team or your practices? Because ultimately that's what we're after, is changing your workflows, right? So that in the future, as you develop other products, then you have a team in place, you have a process You have a way of communicating what you've done, and so that's a more lasting change, right? Than
Yes.
saying, "Oh, you met these requirements, check, and we're done." So
Yeah.
I love that what you said, Allison. This is a journey. I mean, accessibility in general is a journey. It's not a
Mhm.
destination. So great news. We have some
Woohoo!
recipients.
Yes.
Where's the confetti?
That's right. Oh, I'll see if I think I can make some.
And if you are in the presentation today, if you're one of these products, please let us know in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. So Newzella, Seesaw, Eureka Mask Square by Gray Minds, Playaway is in process, but I'm very sure, very confident that very soon they will have it. And then Corgi, which is one of our own tools at CAST. Different team developed that.
Yes.
So I'm going to share some examples from Corgi because I can do that.
And it's nice to know that our own products are going through this process as well. So you can know when you use a product from CAST and it has the product certification, you'll understand what that means.
Absolutely. So let me pause here. We have a few minutes. I do want to share some examples with you, of some best practices that I look for so that a product can get through that first hurdle. And then, Allison, I'll invite you to comment on what you're looking for as well on the
That's
UDL
great.
alignment side. So
Sounds good.
any questions, anyone, please feel free to use the chat. I don't know if you can unmute in this setup. It's different than what I'm typically used to with this webinar setup, but please let us know if you have any questions.
Mhm. I'm not seeing any yet.
All right. Well, I will try to leave a little bit of time. So if it takes you some time to kind of put those questions into the chat, please, feel free to do that. Or of course, we will drop our email addresses. So for Luis, it's L Perez. It's really easy at cast.org. So if you want to reach out after the session, you have a question, or you want to refer us to a vendor who might be thinking about, pursuing this course of action, we would love to hear from them. So you can, send them our way, and we'll get them into the pipeline here. So what I had planned to do, since we know Corgi, is I want to share a couple of examples of what we look for when we are looking at products here. So one of the things that we look for is a solid accessibility statement. And so I'm going to go to the Corgi website. It'll take me a second to open up. And let me know, are you able to see the screen, Allison?
Yes,
Okay,
looks
great.
great.
So one of the things that we're looking for is, can you find the accessibility statement? Right, so it's easy to find, it's not hidden anywhere. And Corgi has their accessibility policy right underneath their policy privacy, which is great. And it's part of the footer. So that means that every page that you visit on the Corgi website, you'll be able to get to this accessibility policy. So that's one of the things in our accessibility baseline is there an accessibility policy or an accessibility statement? Is it public? So I don't have to call somebody or hunt it down. And is it easy to find, right? So the footer is the best place. And then the Corgi accessibility policy follows a lot of best practices, right? So number one, you're stating what standards you are aiming to follow, right? As you design the tool and as you provide updates to it. And so there's a clear statement here that they're following WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and that they're also trying to conform with Section 508, which is our federal accessibility policy, but it's often written into a lot of other things, right? Because the government is so influential in our economy. And then we have contact information, very important. So if you have an accessibility challenge as you're using the product, is there an easy way to communicate with somebody? And following the UDL principles, you'll notice that there's an email, there's a phone
Multiple
number,
ways.
and if you so prefer, you can send us a snail mail. So lots of ways to get in touch with somebody who can, who is responsible for addressing those accessibility issues. Now, Corgi is a very small team. So if you send it to this email address, everybody will get the email. But there are larger groups. And so with those larger groups, we want to make sure that there's a dedicated accessibility email address and a person who's dedicated to monitoring it and sort of handling it and forwarding it to the right people. You'll notice that we have what we call the accessibility conformance report. So this is the completed version of the voluntary product accessibility template, right? That's a vendor reported statement of, here are the standards that we aim for, and here's what we did, right? So I'm going to open that up because I want to share it with you and show you again what I'm looking for as I am evaluating. So things like, clear statement of what methods were used to evaluate the product. Typically, we want to see both manual and automated testing because manual testing really gets at some of the things that automated testers can't. And then what tools did you use to evaluate the product? So here it says we use VoiceOver, the screen reader on the Mac devices, and NVDA, which is a free screen reader available on Windows that is typically used for testing if you don't have access to the JAWS commercial version. It has a statement of the standards that we're aiming for here. And then this is what's most important. Explanations. So wherever we say partially supports, we want a full explanation. How does it partially support that criterion? And then what's missing, right? And what are you going to do about it? And likewise for does not apply. Why doesn't it apply, right? So we want to know, oh, it doesn't apply, the captioning requirements doesn't apply because we have no videos, right? Or the audio description requirements don't apply. We don't have any videos in this tool. So we want to make sure that everything is transparent. Everything is explained and communicated as clearly as possible. So that's basically with the accessibility baseline. Those are the main documents that I'm looking at. It's the accessibility statement and the ACR or accessibility conformance report. But notice we have some additional things here. We've explained the features of the site that will help you use it. Things like skipping the navigation. So if you're a repeat visitor, you don't get mired in going through link after link in order to get to the important information. The fact that we have alt text, how we've handled hyperlinks. And then at the end, we have some helpful information in terms of like, here are the keyboard shortcuts you can use to, zoom in and zoom out. And here are some free screen readers that you could use. So here we've gone above and beyond in terms of providing useful information for those that are using our Corgi tool, which is all web-based. So, but once I do that, right, we go through that accessibility baseline. I'm confident that you've communicated accessibility in a way that's transparent and clear. And by the way, here, this is going to blow your mind. Accessible. So
What?
what? I know, right? But I am looking is the accessibility statement itself accessible? Is the way that you've shared the VPAT or the completed version of the VPAT, the ACR, is that accessible? Because we want people with disabilities on these review teams, right? And so if they're not receiving the information in an accessible way, then they can't participate in those decisions. And who better to tell you if a product is accessible or not than a person who has to use it? So I have failed a number of submissions because they had the information, but it wasn't accessible. And so that doesn't allow everybody to participate in the process. So that's key for me. That's like, I will draw the line there because I am a person with a disability myself who works in accessibility. And so everything has to be accessible for me to have an equal experience, right?
And when we say fail, we mean we just hope you make that improvement. You
Oh,
continue
yeah,
on the
yeah.
journey and resubmit it. So just so you all know, you don't just get a big red pen F and it's done. It's
Yeah,
it's again, you're
that's,
entering into a journey with us.
thank you for
No,
correcting me. Yeah,
just
I've been in school way too long.
That's right. That's right.
No, we provide extensive feedback. Like we want you to get better. And again, it's about improving process, not just product, but process. So you'll get significant feedback from us. So just want to share those couple of things. But then it goes to Allison. And so Allison, do you want to comment on what are you looking
Yeah,
for?
and I recognize we're at time, so I do want to respect your time, everyone. So I'll make this quick, but we do not expect you ever to use every UDL consideration. That's not good design, right? So some of the first questions we look for, or that we hope you'll start to share with us, are what's the intent, what's the goal, what's the purpose of your product? And once we understand, this is what you're trying to get your learners to achieve, then we're able to think with you, what are some of the barriers that traditionally can challenge learners from being able to reach that goal? And how is your tool reducing those barriers? And so we again engage in a dialogue where you're asked to consider each of the UDL guidelines. There are 9 of them, 3 under each of the UDL principles. But if one doesn't apply to you, you just say, this actually, given the goal for our product, this particular guideline is not one that we've addressed. And again, your rationale for the intentionality behind your design is what we're looking for. Because again, with UDL, we want to make sure, I often give this example. In universal design and architecture, it doesn't mean you're going to run around to all the staircases and put a ramp on all the steps, right? You really want to, each staircase, you want to think about what's the goal, what's the best design for this context. As Luis mentioned earlier, we really want to consider the unique context of each of your products. So we're looking for the language, your explanation of, here's the goal and here are the ways the different guidelines are coming to life in our particular product in order to reduce the barriers for learners. And we do ask, are these options available for all your learners? Because we're a little skeptical when we say, oh, this option's only for a student with, because part of UDL is having a clear goal and opening up the options to everyone. So again, we really try to have that UDL mindset when we come to this conversation with you. And that's why the alignment is described as the UDL framework and guidelines, because yes, we are considering how you are integrating those 9 guidelines, but we really want to make sure it's in service of the goal to reduce the barriers, because what's essential for some can be good for all. So hopefully that is a helpful overview of what we're hoping each of the products are able to demonstrate, and again, continue to build to make sure that our learners are getting what they need when they need it.
Absolutely. That's the goal. And that's a great place to end our conversation, but it's not the end. We're going to
That's right.
continue it. But please feel free to reach out to either Allison or myself. And then there's a question. How much is the service for the certification? So the certification
Good question.
itself is $2,000. And that is for a time frame of I think it's 2 years, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, but what we're trying to do too sometimes is if you want to work up a bigger contract with us, like maybe you want some coaching before you apply for this, we would love that. Like we would have, like Allison said at the beginning, we would love to establish a relationship with you. And so we can provide coaching as well, because the certification is just a small part of like creating more accessible, inclusive tools. So that would be the ideal thing, is that we create
Yeah.
a bigger contract where we can, bring your team, coach your team, so that they become more well versed in accessibility and the UDL guidelines. But again, you could also just apply through the link on the CAST website. And
It may sound like a high amount, but it is really, we give very thorough feedback. So it's not just a check. It is formative feedback that hopefully will really deepen the learning. And okay, thank you for being in touch. A digital case library. That sounds very
we
cool.
love it. Yeah, we'd love to hear
Yes.
from you. All right,
Yes.
everybody. But we love this. If you let us keep going, we'll keep going all day.
That's
But
right.
we have
That's right.
to come to an end. So please be in touch if you have any questions. And really, again, appreciate your time this afternoon, and appreciate all of you for, your concern, your interest in accessibility and UDL, and for doing everything you're doing to make the world a better place, a more inclusive, safe, and rewarding experience for everybody. Thanks so
Yes.
much.
Thank you. Have a great day.